and welcome back to a very special episode of Get Kafka-Nated. In between episodes 1 and 2, we're joined by Viktor Somogyi-Vass, my new colleague at Aiven and an Apache Kafka Committer for this bonus episode. Welcome to the show, Viktor.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
So, Viktor, you've just joined our Kafka and streaming team here at Aiven. I think this is week 2. We held off on grabbing you for an interview, but we're super excited to have you on the show. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm also excited. And although this has been my second week, it was going pretty quickly.
Definitely hitting the ground running.
Yeah.
So jumping right into it. Before this role, you spent I think 9 years at Cloudera, of building your expertise in Kafka there, and you I think became an Apache Kafka committer whilst working at Cloudera. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
What made you decide that now was the time for a change? What brings you to Aiven?
So spending 9 years at the company, I think, is in itself a lot of time. So I kind of wanted some change, and that is mostly the main reason, I think. I sometimes say that whenever somebody asks this question, I can tell a new reason for why did I change. But really, it's changing from a career or professional standpoint. And what I also see is kind of why I joined Aiven is that Aiven is working on a lot of interesting stuff. Diskless and kind of the whole platform seems like an interesting challenge to me.
And we'll definitely touch more on that in a moment. The streaming landscape has evolved a lot. I think it's fair to say in that period of time, right? Since you started at Cloudera. What does Aiven specifically kind of bring to that landscape, maybe in addition to Diskless, that's kind of particularly exciting for you?
I think the managed offering, mainly because in my experience is that whenever somebody starts out with Kafka, it has a really steep learning curve. So and once people start out with Kafka and they soon realize that they don't really want to host this stuff, and they just want it to run and want to use it. So I think from this perspective, Aiven has a really interesting proposition, also when they start using Kafka, they start usually using different systems, and when you get into that ecosystem, it's just much easier for people. Even if you're a developer, you can, with the free Kafka tier now, you can just try it out and have basically a zero onboarding cost. So I think this is a very interesting stuff, and definitely when I started using Kafka, it wasn't like this. And I remember that back then we recommended people to do not even use virtual machines, because Kafka is built in a way that you have to reuse this on bare metal. So yeah,
that's a great answer. I really like that. The kind of excitement that comes in something being more accessible and easier to use. Suddenly you have this sort of set of building blocks that you can use to do engineering and build things, rather than having to worry about specific configuration. That's something that really drew me to Aiven as well, back in May of last year or whenever I started. So we touched on Diskless a couple of times there. So you're joining the team working on Diskless Kafka, which for those who have been living under a rock, I guess, is our Diskless architecture kind of implementation that we have managed on our platform, and that we're also trying to bring to open source. For listeners who might not be familiar with Diskless, what problem does Diskless Kafka solve?
Back to the last question a bit. When we suggested people to start their own Kafka and run it on bare metal and stuff like that. So Kafka uses its own disks, which are attached to that machine. Long time ago, in the previous decade or previous century, Not previous century. Kafka isn't that old yet. So yeah, we also recommended to run Kafka with RAID configurations, which is a very expensive, very heavyweight stuff. And then JBOD usage was added to it, but still Kafka requires disk and so on. And so if you manage Kafka, if you operate it yourself, it's very heavyweight, expensive. Well, not expensive, but as we discussed, complicated. Now you can outsource it to someone like Aiven, for instance, or you can run it on one of the cloud providers, or you do you. There are many ways to run Kafka, but still, it is somewhat expensive because usually Kafka requires disks attached to the virtual machine or wherever it runs. So, and this in itself is has a cost implication, versus using an object storage is much cheaper. Like it might have some trade-off because it might be a bit slower, but in many cases it's not required to have like millisecond latency. And for this is very useful. And also compared to 10 years ago, like new requirements arise, like you have to be elastic, you have to scale dynamically, because Kafka has, because of this older like requirements that it was developed for, it has a little bit different requirements than a modern like cloud streaming system would have. If I would have developed Kafka right now from the start, from zero, then I would definitely do it differently, not as it was done back then. But by design, you have to over provision your Kafka clusters if you run it on a VM, because you have to account for spikes, traffic spikes, and so on. And Diskless helps a lot, because in a diskless world, you wouldn't really need to have disks. You wouldn't really need to have like more compute than you need at the time. You could just scale up and down as you want. The object storage doesn't really matter in this case, because it is a remote storage. You don't have to attach disks and so on. So it won't really be over provisioned, so therefore it minimizes costs as well, but you can also scale up and down, in and out as you wish.
I really like that way of thinking about diskless in terms of like that modernization of coming from the individual bare metal or the rack level kind of thinking into the kind of the cloud environment, right? With this decoupling of storage and compute, and the elimination of some of the cross AZ stuff, where you're taking the system that was developed for the data center and putting it onto the cloud, like with the considerations are different. I think, and
also many people run it on Kubernetes as well. So we have Streamzy, which is a really cool project, and it also they also demoed their auto scaling capabilities already with TS storage in one of the Kafka summits. So yeah.
Yeah, Streamzy is doing some like really cool stuff. I mean, that's one of the cool things about Kafka, I think, is because it's almost like a spec at this point. You have the Kafka compatibility, like you can have all these different like interesting implementations.
Yeah.
On that point around like the journey from Kafka as this like data center, like bare metal application into the kind of the cloud, I think that's something that you have a lot of perspective on, right? You were a co-author of KIP 1134, right? So virtual clusters in Kafka, so that's kind of better supporting multi-tenancy and running Kafka at scale with the kind of design considerations that requires. How does that connect to what you'll be building at Aiven with Diskless?
So so multi-tenancy itself is, I think, is not really solved in Kafka right now, hence the KIP, obviously. So whenever a company starts out self-hosting their own, or we can also talk about Aiven's case, because it is really similar, because we host a big Kafka fleet, but companies, especially large ones, end up doing kind of similar just for themselves, because often, if you're, I don't know, Uber or someone, then you usually don't rent Kafka, but host it yourself. So in these cases, it's really hard to manage a big Kafka installations, because usually usually if you host it yourself, you kind of start out with one cluster, then it becomes random multiple clusters, then you somehow start to organize this into a one cluster where you have an operator, and that would give you permissions, but then it becomes a bottleneck as well, because even if you have to create a topic, you have to change the permissions of the topic, add the new user, whatever, you have to go to this operator. And with proper multi-tenancy, these kind of tasks should be outsourced to each of the teams. And with Diskless, I think it is just making this whole thing more lightweight, more easy to outsource these tasks to the different teams, if you think in terms of teams for a generic Kafka installations. But also it would make hosting Kafka even a little bit cheaper, because because multi-tenancy basically adds a quota improvement into it as well. So we would define like hard caps for different virtual clusters. That's why it's called virtual clusters. So right now Kafka works in a little bit interesting way, because if you add quotas, then they are additive and you can specify more than your actual limits. But with virtual clusters, it would be a hard limit. So if you have, I don't know, 50 for 1, 50 for 2, then you cannot really exceed this for the users and traffic inside those virtual clusters. So it would be very easy to utilize that that kind of cluster environment or traffic or bandwidth that you already have. And that way it optimizes the costs even more, besides adding this kind of nice functionality that you can like have team operators and team admins who manage their own stuff.
Nice. That's a great answer. So do you think it's fair to say then, so with the KIPA 1134 being this piece around kind of the governance and the management of Kafka, and Diskless being this piece around like cost savings, both of them have this both of them kind of have it, probably a simplification, but like both of them having this like through line of being about, okay, what does like Kafka at scale look like, and what does like a modern Kafka look like at these huge scales?
Yeah.
Kind of following on from some of these like questions around like Diskless and KIPA 1134 and your previous work, what are you most excited to get your hands on in the coming months, once we've given you some more time to get settled in?
Well, I think, Diskless, obviously. The KIP is under vote right now, so I'm really hoping that it will get voted. I need to look into it a little bit more, because the past year I've been working mainly on Cloudera internal projects, so I didn't really have the bandwidth to follow up upstream. So I need to look into it, but I'm really excited. From what I've seen from Incless, I've seen it has a good opportunity, and I'm excited to contribute, create sub-KIPs, improve it, because I think it's a crucial feature for Kafka to implement. And then perhaps after this, we can also. I'm also excited to work on the multi-tenancy to continue that, because that of course wasn't. I didn't create it, or we didn't create it because we didn't want it. But I would like to see that also as part of Kafka.
That's huge. That's super exciting. I I really like that for you as like being like the, oh, I have the time to work on the open source stuff. Like, I want to work on it. It's such a heady thrill. All right, I'm like, oh man, that's super exciting. After these, I think it must be like nearly 8 years now of contributing to Kafka. Is there anything that still surprises you about the project? Like,
8 years, I didn't contribute for 8 years to Kafka. No, I was in the Kafka team for 8 years at Cloudera, but I also contributed to cruise control, worked on internal projects. So it was, I mean, if I can say like 6 years, 7 years, maybe.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But I just wanted to say that I also did that besides of this.
That's very fair. Thank you for the correction. I shall double check my notes. I think 8 years then maybe working with Kafka. Would be more fair to say. Is there anything that still like surprises you about the project?
Surprises? I don't know. I wouldn't say surprise is the best expression. Maybe excited. I don't. Confluent has been bought up by IBM, and people have been saying. Some people have been saying this is a very bad thing for Confluent. Of course, it's a bad thing, but for streaming, I think it's rather exciting because there were and are many like similar systems or people who have been building of Kafka, like on Kafka protocol and something like that. And I think it's very exciting, mainly where do we take the Kafka protocol, because I think that is one of the core strengths of Kafka, because every Kafka like alternative builds on the same protocol. So it becomes really an ad hoc standard for streaming, which I think is very exciting. That where do we take that and how will it improve?
Yeah,
which I don't really have a good answer for it. That where should we improve it? Because, but that I think is very exciting. That it became such a ad hoc standard.
That's a great answer. And I think that's something that's come up a lot on the show over the last 6 months, a year, however long now, of like this idea of Kafka as a standard more and more, and like what that means for the industry. And I particularly like that idea of like with the Confluent acquisition, like what does that mean for the open source community? Is there going to be more investment in this as an open source standard, as this like common thread now across all these organizations?
Very
exciting to see.
And I think that the IBM acquisition also like proves that Kafka is really important, because otherwise IBM wouldn't have bought Confluent. So I think that what this really underlines is that Kafka is kind of here to stay.
It certainly is. One final question for you, and thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great little conversation. What's one thing that you wish more people understood about Kafka?
Networking. Because
that's so real.
When I worked at Cloudera, we had many escalations because people were not setting up or didn't think networking through when they created a multi-AZ environment, for instance. They just went with the standard configurations. And since they didn't really have the expertise to set it up, so if you start with Kafka, of course, you won't think about network buffers. You would just set it up somewhere and let's go. But yeah, so we had many escalations, customers coming with this problem that, hey, my nodes are like disconnecting from Zookeeper. Luckily, Zookeeper is not a problem for now. Those who use Kafka 4, but I think there are many people who still use the Zookeeper Kafka. So of course we have to take this into account. But surprisingly, networking, setting up network buffers correctly for cross AZ traffic was a problem for many people, because people don't think about this when they start with Kafka.
It's a really good shout. Yeah, I think it is the whole world of open source data projects where it's like the euphoria a little bit off the beaten path, and you're like, okay, like here be giants, like here are some big technical problems to figure out to get this working the way I want it to. Awesome. Yeah. Well, brilliant stuff. Thank you so much for your time today, Viktor. I really enjoyed that.
You're very welcome. I was happy to talk.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad. And I suspect we'll be seeing a lot more of you soon.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
All the best. And thank you to everyone for listening along at home to this special extra episode. In February, we'll be joined by Victor Kessler from Vacamo for an episode all about iceberg rest. And I will see you then. All the best.